Lena had another daughter, but this time the baby looked nothing like her sisters. She was tiny, with strange features, and not what Nena expected. Tears filled Nena's eyes in horror and sadness as she stared at the baby. Once upon a time, in a quaint village named Anaku, nestled in the eastern part of Nigeria, and under King Orji's kind rule, lived Childe and Nena, a couple whose beauty was the talk of the town. Everyone in Anaku would dream out loud about their future children, convinced that such stunning parents would only have the most breathtakingly beautiful kids. Just as everyone guessed, Childe and Nena were blessed with four beautiful daughters: Apunau, Ugomma, Oyibo, and Bekee. These girls were so stunning that anyone who saw them had to stop and look again. Their beauty became the pride of the village. People praised Nena's womb of beauty, and mothers often gifted the girls, hoping one day their sons would win their hearts. Years later, Nena had another daughter, but this time the baby looked nothing like her sisters. She was tiny and had strange features. She was not what Nena expected. Tears filled Nena's eyes in horror and sadness. Her husband, unable to face the unexpected, fled, claiming he couldn't stay with what he wrongly called evil under his roof. Nena's heart was shattered, torn between the pain of her husband's departure and the arrival of her strange child. Conflicted and overwhelmed, she kept the baby hidden, secretly wishing for her to quietly die. Yet, as the child resiliently clung to life, Nena slowly accepted her reality. She named the child Emerem Gini, meaning, "What did I do?" Emerem began growing up and grew up to be a very ugly girl. Her sisters treated her like she was a disease, and no one even cared if she was human. Her mother would never let her out of the house. She was always indoors to avoid the wagging mouth of the villagers. But it didn't stop them, as the villagers still talked. Emerem was turned into a slave in her own father's house because she was ugly and looked very tidy. She wasn't growing like every normal child. She did all the house chores in the house, yet no one appreciated her. At every slightest mistake, her mother would call her a cursed child. "What did I ever do to deserve a child like you? You do not look like your mother. You do not look like your father. You are an abomination." Sometimes, Emerem doubted if Nena was truly her mother, as it seemed like she had only 4 children. But she endured all the ill treatments, hoping that she would die one day. She never thought there would ever be hope for her. Every day, Emerem sat alone and cried. She couldn't help but notice how different she looked from her sisters, and she couldn't understand what she had done to deserve such a harsh life. While her mother showered her sisters with lovely gifts, no one spared Emerem a glance, unless they needed her to do some chores. Emerem's mother made it clear she was not to leave the house. Yet, whenever the house was empty, Emerem found solace in the forest, beneath the comforting shade of a tree. There, surrounded by the quiet of the woods, she would sing. Singing breathed life into her, lifted her from her sadness, and for a brief time made her forget her troubles at home. Singing became a secret joy, and each evening, before anyone else came back, she would hurry home, holding onto the peace she found in her melodies. One day, while Emerem was lost in her songs under the tree, some girls returning with firewood spotted her. Dropping their loads in fear, they raced home, shouting, "Evil spirits! Evil spirits! Evil spirits!" Realizing the danger, Emerem knew she had to rush home to avoid being caught. By sundown, rumors had flown across the village about an evil spirit haunting the Achara forest, which had supposedly sought refuge in Nnenna's house. Unknown to Emerem, some of the children who saw her followed her home as she ran, tracing the source of their fear right to her doorstep. Immediately Nnenna heard this, she was so angry that she ran home, cursing at Emerem under her breath. "That evil child wants to embarrass me. Today, I will deal with her." When she got home, she angrily asked Emerem why she left the hut against her instructions. But as Emerem opened her mouth to speak, she began to hit her. "You want to disgrace me in this village, you cursed child." She lashed at her. When she left, Emerem cried her heart out, wishing death would take her. She couldn't bear the thought that she looked like nothing but an evil spirit in the eyes of the village children, and also couldn't understand why her mother hated her that much. She didn't create herself, she cried. When everything had died down, her mother came into her room and called her out in the middle of the night. "I need you to escort me somewhere," she said to her. "A friend of mine needs help." Emerem was surprised. Her mother had never calmly spoken to her before, so she felt her mother regretted her actions towards her and wanted to make amends. Hence, she followed her happily. They walked for a long time, crossing rivers and climbing mountains, but the journey was endless. At some point, Emerem got tired. "Mother, this place we are going to, is it still far?" "No," she responded. "We are almost there." Emerem was scared to provoke her mother by asking her more questions, but she wondered why her mother's friend had to live in that faraway forest. As they got to the middle of nowhere, her mother stopped and faced her. "I don't know how I got you, evil child. You have brought only pain to my heart, and I wish you died the day I had you. I've always prayed for you to die since I had you, but you refused to die. Rather, you have only brought me pain and shame. I won't allow you to embarrass me before the villagers. That's why I've brought you here." She turned, leaving Emerem in the forest. Emerem cried and cried, pleading with her mother, but her mother ignored her and went back home. Emerem was heartbroken. The forest howled with different sounds of wild animals, and she clutched her heart in fear. Her mother had just abandoned her to die in the forest. Out of fear, she ran after her mother, calling and pleading with her not to leave her. But she lost her to the dark forest. She began wandering around the forest, and when she got tired, Emerem sat under a tree and cried her heart out. She knew she was going to die, and she prayed the death came quickly. The forest was dark and terrifying, and she closed her eyes. Soon, sleep took over her. Emerem felt a gentle tap and opened her eyes to see an old woman in front of her. She quickly stood up, scared and shaking, almost wetting herself. She realized she was still in the forest and was puzzled to see the old woman there. Then, the old woman spoke in a voice that was calm and comforting. "My dear, don't be scared. I mean no harm. I was just getting some cooking water and saw you. Why are you out here?" Emerem thought back to what happened the night before and started to cry. The old woman gently comforted her and then invited her to come home with her, saying she couldn't stand the thought of leaving Emerem alone in the forest. Emerem carried the water alongside the old woman as they headed to her home. They arrived at a simple, somewhat run-down hut, hidden deep in the forest. Despite its appearance, the place was tidy, clearly someone's home. Emerem couldn't help but feel it was a bit strange. Who would choose to live all alone out here, she wondered. She was even more surprised when the old woman mentioned she had been living there for more than 20 years. The old woman cooked some boiled yam, explaining to Emerem that she found the seeds in the forest and planted them near her hut. She also had plenty of fruits and veggies, suggesting a life of simple self-sufficiency surrounded by nature. After their meal, Emerem opened up about her life, and the old woman listened with deep sympathy. "Your mother has been very cruel," she said, clearly upset. "I would have been grateful to have a child, no matter what she looked like, even like you. But don't worry, I will help you." The old woman began to share her own story with Emerem, making the moment even more special. She told her about a long time ago when she got married, full of hopes and dreams. However, life had other plans. She couldn't have children, which brought her much sadness. Seeing this, her husband decided to marry another woman in hopes of having a child. Tragically, when the new wife had a baby, the baby didn't survive. Immediately, fingers pointed at her, accusing her of causing the baby's death out of jealousy. The situation worsened when her co-wife also passed away from a mysterious illness. And again, the blame fell squarely on her shoulders. Her husband, swayed by the villagers' gossip, couldn't stand by her, and she was unjustly labeled a witch and banished to what they call the evil forest. "I've lived here since that day," she told Emerem, her voice a mix of sorrow and strength. "For 20 years, I've been all alone, with not a single soul passing by. But now, I think the gods saved me just for you. You are not just any child, you are a star, and I see its glow right on your forehead." Emerem laughed. "A star? Me? Here in this thick so-called evil forest?" It all seemed too strange and unbelievable. But what she didn't realize was that Oyego, the old woman, was no ordinary person. She had incredible powers hidden beneath her humble appearance and the simple life she led in the forest. Emerem was about to discover just how extraordinary her new friend was. The connection between her and Emerem grew stronger as they both found solace in their shared experiences of unjust treatment and exile. In the village, Nnenna felt a weight lift off her shoulders. A secret she had harbored for years now seemingly resolved. Whenever someone inquired about Emerem, Nnenna simply said she had died. She couldn't stand the thought of being labeled an evil woman just because she had a child who looked strange. This lie was her escape from judgment and the whispers of the villagers, providing her with a false sense of relief from the guilt and complexity of her relationship with Emerem. Life continued to be favorable for Nnenna's beautiful daughters, who had blossomed into stunning young women. Their beauty was renowned throughout the kingdom, drawing suitors from far and near to their doorstep, each one hoping to win the hearts of one of these celebrated sisters. The fame of their attractiveness had spread so widely that their home became a gathering place for those seeking to marry, not just for love, but for the allure that came with the promise of such remarkable beauty. Meanwhile, in the village of Anako, King Oji was facing his golden years with a heavy heart, caught in a web of uncertainty. As the tradition dictated, he was to pass on the crown to one of his sons before he departed from this world. However, the palace was shrouded in confusion, as the decision of who should inherit the kingship was not clear-cut. This predicament left the entire royal household, and indeed the village at large, in a state of anxious anticipation, wondering how the king would resolve this crucial dilemma. King Oji's dilemma revolved around his two sons, Chike and Dike, who were twins. Their entrance into the world was marked by a tale as unique as they were. The queen went into labor under the cover of the night, and in the urgency of the moment, her maidservants dashed out to summon the midwife. However, by the time the midwife arrived at the queen's chamber, the twins had already been born. In the hustle to clean and care for the queen and her newborns, no one thought to note which of the twins had been born first. This oversight led to a pressing and unprecedented question within the palace walls. Which of the twins was destined to ascend the throne? The lack of clarity on this critical detail posed a significant challenge, casting a shadow of uncertainty over the future leadership of Anako. As King Oji grew older, his concerns deepened. His sons Chike and Dike shared a bond deeper than mere brotherhood. They were the best of friends, yet it was clear that their hearts lay in different places. Chike harbored a deep fascination with the throne, often lost in daydreams of ruling Anako. He was drawn to the prestige and respect that came with being king. Dike, on the other hand, showed little interest in royal ambitions. His nature was gentle and lovable, making him beloved among the people. His passion was his ranch, where he poured his energy and love, content with the life he built away from the throne's allure. King Oji noticed Chike's keen interest in leadership and Dike's indifference. Despite understanding Chike's desires, The king resolved to leave the decision to the gods. He believed in allowing a higher power to guide the future of Anako. If the gods chose Chike, then he would accept that destiny with open arms, trusting that the welfare of his kingdoms would be in the hands of fate. King Oji, seeking wisdom, gathered with the village elders to call upon Ezemo, revered as the eyes of the gods, for guidance. Upon arrival, Ezemo made himself comfortable on a spread-out mat, entering a state of deep communion with the deities of the land. After a solemn period of invocation, he shared the divine directive. The princes were to undertake a quest in 4 market days, venturing into the mysterious Ajadu forest. Their mission was to find a special staff hidden deep within the earth of the forest. The true heir to the throne would be revealed by a guiding light within the forest, leading him to the staff, a sign of the gods' favor and protection. The king felt a weight lift from his shoulders with the assurance of his son's safe return. By the chief priest. Following the seer's instructions, the princes were to undergo a purification ritual without delay, preparing their spirits and bodies for the pivotal journey ahead. This process was not just about physical readiness, but symbolized their readiness to face whatever challenges lay in the path dictated by the gods, embarking on a journey that would not only test their courage, but also define the future of Anako. In the serene heart of the forest, where Uyego and Emerem had found solace together, Uyego revealed a significant truth to Emerem. Uyego wasn't just any inhabitant of the forest. She was a seer, blessed with profound insight and power. She unveiled the dark tale of Emerem's birth. Something very grave happened while your mother was carrying you, Uyego began. One day, she visited the market with a craving for a particular type of meat. However, the price was far beyond what she was willing to pay. Despite the cost, her desire was overpowering. Amidst the hustle and crowd around the butcher's store, she seized the opportunity to take the meat without payment. Unnoticed, she left, leaving behind an innocent woman to bear the blame and the consequences of her actions. This woman, wrongly accused and publicly humiliated, as the angry mob stripped her naked and beat her up, cried out in her anguish and innocence, causing her accusers and the unseen thief to bear a lifetime of shame. Since your mother was pregnant with you, the curse took hold on you instead. Tears streamed down Emerem's cheeks as she absorbed the tale of her mother's deed, understanding for the first time the source of her pain and difference. Uyego comforted her, promising liberation from the curse. They would undertake a 7-day ritual of purification and appeal to the spirits for mercy. During this time, Emerem was to fast from food and water, preparing her spirit and body for the final step of the ritual. On the 7th day, she would immerse herself in the sacred waters of the Ajadu River, washing away the curse and emerging renewed, ready to embrace her true essence, free from the shadows of the curse. as the quest for the future king of Anaku began. Princes Chike and Dike ventured into the dense Ajadu forest, their paths diverging as soon as they sought the divine staff. Guided by Ezemo's prophecy, they knew they just had 7 days to complete their task. Chike, driven by his ambition, searched tirelessly, yet the guiding light eluded him. Dike too found no sign of the light for days, growing weary with the search. On the 3rd day, Chike stumbled upon an old woman in distress, her cries piercing the forest's silence. Focused solely on his quest for kingship, he chose to ignore her plea for help, convinced that nothing should divert his attention from his goal. Meanwhile, Dike, seeking a moment's rest, had the same cries of panic and pain. Despite his initial fear and confusion, his compassionate heart couldn't ignore the suffering voice. Driven by the desire to aid, he followed the sounds, only to find the old woman suddenly disappear as he approached her. In her place, a bright light appeared, beckoning him forward. He followed the light, which led him through the dense forest to a vast cave. Inside, the light focused on a glowing spot on the cave floor. Filled with determination, Dike dug at the spot and unearthed the staff, its glow a beacon of his success. The journey back home was filled with a sense of accomplishment and relief. Unlike his brother, Dike had allowed his kindness to guide him and had led him to the very goal they both sought. Upon crossing 2 rivers on his journey back, Dike encountered Chike and excitedly shared his discovery. Chike's heart sank with the news, and bitterness swiftly took root in his heart. He couldn't understand why Dike, who already seemed to have everything, love from the queen, adoration from the townspeople, and wealth from his successful ranch, should also be the one to find the staff. This was the one thing Chike had longed for himself. Hiding his envy, Chike congratulated Dike and asked for a brief pause, claiming he needed a moment alone to ease himself. Trusting and unsuspecting, Dike waited under a tree. Seizing this moment, Chike attacked Dike from behind with a heavy stick, striking him until he fell motionless. Believing Dike to be dead, Chike grabbed the staff and hurried back to the village. His return sparked widespread celebration among the villagers, who interpreted his success as divine selection. The air was filled with the rhythm of drums and the joy of dancers, as the village had been filled with anticipation since the princes had departed. Drained and hungry from his days in the forest, Chike was welcomed with a lavish meal prepared by his mother. As he rested from the ordeal, the villagers' joy was tinged with concern for Dike, whose fate remained unknown to them. The celebration for Chike's return masked a dark deed, leaving the true test of character and destiny unresolved. Emerem had fulfilled the 7-day ritual and had taken her bath in the Ajadu River. True to the words of Uyego, she came out of the water with a very beautiful skin, her deformity totally healed, and her body glowing like the sun itself. She was so happy, as she couldn't believe she would no longer live with the stigma. Uyego asked her to return back home so she could live her dreams, but she said no, choosing to stay back with her instead. She couldn't leave Uyego, as she was the kindest woman she ever met. Besides, Uyego was old and needed some help around. One evening, while returning from the river, Emerem was startled by the sound of someone in pain. Overcoming her fear, she went close and discovered a man lying in the forest, weakened and bleeding. Rushing back, she called Uyego, and together they brought the man to their hut. Uyego, with her knowledge of healing, took care of his wounds and began treating him with her herbal remedies. Meanwhile, the palace was engulfed in worry. Over a week had passed without any sign of Prince Dike, prompting the king to dispatch a search team into the forest, with orders to return with the prince alive or dead. But even after an exhaustive search, extending beyond 14 days, there was no trace of him. The king, heartbroken, assumed the worst, that his beloved son had fallen prey to wild beasts, and declared a 7-day mourning period for Dike, a testament to the prince's widespread adoration. Following the mourning, plans were made to continue with the traditional rituals leading up to the coronation, including a 14-day period of fortification for the prince, culminating in the official ceremony. The kingdom prepared to move forward, even as Dike's fate remained unknown to them. His true situation, hidden within the depths of the forest under Uyego and Emerem's care. In the forest, Prince Dike was recovering fast. He could now talk and eat properly. He had shared his start story with his new friends, and they felt so sorry for him. It was unfortunate that the three of them had treaded the path of betrayal, and it was the one thing that brought them together. You will get better soon, and you will go back to your village in good health. The gods have preserved you for the throne, Uyego said to him. Dike couldn't still believe his own brother did that to him, and all for the throne. But he was glad the gods saved him. He enjoyed the company of Emerem and the old woman. Uyego was very nice and caring, and Emerem was a beauty with an angelic voice. Every evening, she would sit under the tree and sing the prince beautiful songs, which he enjoyed so much. With time, they grew closer, and each day, the prince found more reasons to love her. She was so beautiful. The way she took care of him, and the beautiful songs she sang him, could not just leave his mind. Uyego had caught him severally as he stared at her while she cooked, and it got her so excited. He knew within him that he had just found a wife, the woman of his dreams. On the day of the coronation, the whole village gathered to celebrate the crowning of the new king. Kings and princes from different kingdoms were invited. Noblemen of calibers were invited. Prince Chike felt so proud. He had dreamt about this day his whole life, and in a few hours he would be pronounced king. That day, he dressed in his royal apparel and looked so handsome. When he stepped out, the villagers couldn't argue that the gods had made the right choice, as Prince Chike looked so glorious in his royal attire. As the traditional priest and the Onowu, the chief kingmaker, conducted the final rituals of the coronation, Chike was declared king. Yet, as he attempted to sit on the throne, an unseen force repelled him. He tried severally to sit on the throne, but each time he tried it, it burned him. It was as if the seat of power rejected him. The crowd watched in stunned silence, their excitement turning to confusion and fear as they couldn't understand what was happening. Just then, Ezemo, the revered seer, entered. All eyes turned to him, desperate for an explanation of the unsettling spectacle. With a voice that commanded attention, Ezemo revealed the truth. Prince Chike is not the rightful king of this land. He has not earned the staff, and he knows what happened to his brother, Dike. Under Ezemo's powerful enchantment, Chike found himself compelled to speak the truth. He fell to his knees, his voice breaking as he confessed to attacking Dike in the forest, taking the staff by force and leaving his brother dead. The king, along with everyone present, was shocked. "Your own twin brother," the king repeated, unable to grasp the magnitude of Chike's betrayal. The villagers expressed their disdain, openly rejecting the heinous acts Chike had committed. Then, amidst the turmoil, Ezemo announced a turn of fortune. With all eyes on him, he prepared to share a revelation that would reshape the destiny of Anaku. Prince Dike is alive and in the heart of the forest, around the Ajadu River. He was found by two kind people and has fully regained himself. Let the king send out men to go into the forest and bring back the prince. And as for Chike, the king should decide his punishment. With that, he turned and left. Without delay, the king sent out a search party immediately, and they all hurried down to the forest to bring back the prince. Uyego was happy when she saw the king's men. She knew they had come for the prince, and was also happy that Emerem finally found fulfillment. She had watched her bond with the prince, and the love between them was undeniable. Finally, she could die a fulfilled woman, as God has used her to save a kingdom that rejected her 20 years ago. They thanked Uyego and Emerem and took the prince. Tears rolled down Emerem's eyes. She was so sad the prince was leaving, as they both had bonded so well, and she was going to miss him dearly. The prince was a very kind and soft man, and the way he conversed with her, she was so in love with him. She never thought she would ever see him again. But the prince had no plans to leave them. He ordered the men to bring them out of the forest, as they both saved his life. But Uyego insisted she would stay back. That place was home to her, and she never would leave her home. Unknown to them, Uyego was no human but a spirit. She was the guardian of the forest and had existed for over 1,000 years. Her mission was to rescue good people and not allow any harm come near them. But she never reveals her identity to humans so that they wouldn't be scared of her. She could be an old woman, and she could also be a young woman whenever she wanted. All the stories about the villagers banishing her were all made up, and her hut could only be visible whenever she wanted it to be. That was why the first search party couldn't see the hut. She held Dike and Emerem's hand and blessed them. Then she bade them goodbye. As they set off, Emerem turned to bid her goodbye once more, as she wasn't happy to leave her behind. But to her utter amazement, everything had vanished. Fear gripped them, as they now knew that they had been with a god and not a man. The villagers went crazy at the sight of Prince Dike. Everyone was so happy to see him. His mother shed tears of joy. He was a man after the heart of the people. Ezemo was also there to celebrate the prince in person, and a date was fixed immediately for his coronation. It was going to be a double celebration, as he would also be getting married the same day to the love of his life, Emerem. The prince narrated the story of how he found Emerem in the forest and how she was abandoned by her mother, Nnenna. Nnenna was shocked. She couldn't believe it was Emerem standing with the prince. She had changed and looked so beautiful. She cried her heart out when she learned she was the cause of Emerem's misery. Yet, she treated her with so much wickedness. Her sisters, who were all still unmarried, as we were waiting for kings and rich men to come ask for their hand in marriage, were so sorry, as they had all treated Emerem badly. They came closer as they knelt and asked their sister for forgiveness. Emerem had a good heart, and she knew she deserved to be happy and free. The gods had turned her pains into joy. Therefore, she forgave her sisters and her mother. She knew they must have learned their lessons. The villagers stood in shock as the prince openly made his intentions to marry Emerem known. He told them that she was the best thing that had happened to him in his journey. He looked at her with so much love in his eyes, and Emerem loved him too. On a grand occasion, Prince Dike was crowned king alongside his queen Emerem. They got married and lived happily ever after. The king disowned Chike and sent him out of the palace. He was to live like an ordinary man in the village as punishment for what he had done.
This story is about to get even more interesting. Therefore, I really need to know that you are enjoying the story. So, say something in the comment section. Or you can comment whatever it is that you like. I really want to see that you guys are enjoying the story for me to be motivated to post the next story. So please, first of all, subscribe. Secondly, please make sure to like the video. And thirdly, please write a comment, write anything. So, first of all, tell me how interesting the story is and what you've actually learned.
Mma heard the voice and shivered. For years, she hadn't seen any human in this forest, except her mother, and she also didn't want to be seen. She hid behind the trees. "If you are human, please let me see you." Her voice shaking, she replied, "It's better you don't see me, as I look so ugly and scary. I am human, but I look different." The prince laughed. "I don't look any better either. In fact, I'm sure you can't even look worse than me." Once upon a time, In a kingdom that was very beautiful and set on the hills of the eastern parts of Nigeria, there was a very large and rich kingdom called the Aba Kingdom. This kingdom was full of happy people, colorful flowers, and tall trees that whispered in the wind. In this lovely kingdom lived a woman named Nkoli. Nkoli was known by everyone for her stunning beauty and her big, kind heart. She had a smile that could light up the darkest night and hands that were always ready to help. Everyone in the village loved her deeply and spoke wonderful things about her. If anyone needed help, Nkoli was always there. If someone was hungry, she would share her food with them, even if she didn't have much herself. She was very generous and always tried to make others happy. When she was ripe for marriage, Nkoli got married to Nduka, who was famous in the village for playing the flute. His music was so beautiful that it made people dance and smile. When Nkoli and Nduka got married, the whole village was very excited. They celebrated with singing, dancing, and lots of delicious food and gifts. Everyone wished them a life full of happiness and good fortune. The villagers loved Nkoli so much and wanted to see her happy every single day. A few months after Nkoli and Nduka got married, something beautiful happened to them. Nkoli found out she was going to have a baby. This news brought so much joy to her and her husband, Nduka. They were over the moon with happiness. The entire village shared in their joy and celebrated with them. Everyone was excited and couldn't wait to meet the new baby. The villagers loved Nkoli so much and wanted to show her how much they cared. They showered her with love, gifts, and all kinds of help, because she had always been so kind and generous to everyone. As Nkoli's baby grew inside her, her body started to change. She began to have unusual cravings for food. Whenever she smelled delicious food cooking, her mouth would start to water, and she couldn't stop herself from wanting to eat it. Sometimes, the cravings were so strong that she would take her plate and go to ask for some food from the neighbor who was cooking. Many of the village women were happy to share their food with Nkoli. They knew she was a good woman and understood that her cravings were because of her pregnancy. They never saw her as a beggar, just a friend in need. But not everyone felt the same way. Some people in the village whispered behind her back. They wondered why she was always asking for food. They would laugh and say mean things like, "Is she the first woman to be pregnant?" Or, "Does she think she is carrying the Messiah?" But those whispers and mockeries didn't stop Nkoli. She continued to beg for food when her cravings got too strong, because she couldn't help it. One hot afternoon, she was resting under a big tree in front of her hut. Suddenly, she smelled the delicious aroma of fresh fish and salad soup cooking nearby. Her mouth started to water, and she tried hard to resist the craving, but she couldn't. She picked up her plate and went to ask for some food, just like she always did. However, this time was different. The woman cooking the soup was one of the people who didn't like Nkoli. As soon as Nkoli asked for some soup, the woman spoke harshly to her. "Nkoli, the entire village did not get you pregnant," she said meanly. "Why are you making a fool of yourself like this? Everyone says Nkoli is a good woman. Nkoli is a good woman. But look at you now. Tara, get out. I don't have food for you." Nkoli felt a chill run through her body. No one had ever spoken to her like that before. She felt embarrassed and hurt. She wondered what she had done to make the woman so angry. Without saying a word, she turned around and walked back to her home. She sat under the tree and began to cry. The harsh words had wounded her deeply, but even more, she really wanted to eat that delicious fish soup. Nkoli sat under the tree, her mind racing as she thought about what to do. She craved the nsala soup badly and had to find a way to satisfy this burning hunger. Then, suddenly, an idea popped into her head. In their village, there was a river called the Nri River. This river was very special to the villagers. There was a shrine for the river goddess, Nri, built on its banks. The villagers believed that the river could solve many problems and bring good things to those who prayed there. What made the river even more special was that it was full of fish of different kinds. But there was a strict rule in the village. No one was allowed to catch fish or eat any fish from the river. It was said that anyone who ate the fish would be stoned to death by the villagers at the river, else the entire village will pay dearly for it. There were old stories about people who had eaten the fish and had been stoned to death. But that was a very long time ago, Nkoli thought. Her great-grandfather and her grandfather had told her those stories, and she had not witnessed it herself. These old men can exaggerate things sometimes. She wanted to eat this fish soup badly, and the fish from the Nri River seemed like the easiest option now. She felt as if she would die if she didn't get to eat this fish. It was afternoon, and people were barely at the river in the afternoon. Determined, Nkoli decided to go to the Nri River, hoping no one would see her. She pretended as if she was just going to the river to pray to the gods. When she arrived at the river, she was surprised and relieved to see that it was very quiet. Usually, there were villagers praying or children playing and swimming, but today it was empty. Mother Luck must have smiled at her. She took out her water pot and caught plenty of fish, easily, because the river was always full of fish. Nkoli hurried back home with the fish. She cleaned them up and prepared her nsala soup. The smell of the soup filled her home, and she couldn't wait to eat it. As she sat down to enjoy her meal, she felt so happy and satisfied. But her joy didn't last long. Suddenly, she heard loud voices outside her home. A group of angry men stormed into her compound, shouting, "Nkoli, Nkoli, where are you?" Her heart skipped a beat. Had someone seen her at the river? She was sure that no one was there when she caught the fish. Unknown to Nkoli, a child had been nearby, hidden in the bushes, defecating. The child saw Nkoli catch the fish and ran home to tell his father. His father, shocked and angry, went to the village elders, and now they had come for Nkoli. The angry men surrounded her home. It was a terrible crime to kill fish from the Nri River, and they were there to take her to the shrine to face the consequences of her action. Nkoli felt her heart pounding in her chest. She didn't know what to do or say. She had just wanted to eat fish to satisfy her cravings, but now she was in big trouble. The angry men stood outside Nkoli's hut, singing and chanting in loud, furious voices. Their anger filled the air like a dark cloud. Nkoli knew she had no choice but to step out of her hut. As soon as she did, the men grabbed her and took her away. They continued to sing and chant as they marched her towards the shrine. The noise drew the attention of the villagers, and many people came out to see what was happening. When they saw it was Nkoli, they wept. Some, which hated Nkoli, whispered amongst themselves that Nkoli's cravings had finally gotten her into serious trouble. These women hated Nkoli just because everyone else in the village loved her so much. The men were planning to take Nkoli to the river and there stone her to death. Nkoli felt tears rolling down her cheeks as she begged them to show her mercy. But the men didn't listen. They were too angry to care about her pleas. Finally, they reached the shrine. At the shrine, the chief priest forced Nkoli to kneel by the river. He ordered the men to pick up stones and stone her to death, as it was the punishment meted out to the defaulters. She has desecrated our land, and she deserves to die. Else, she puts everyone in this village in trouble. We can't risk facing the wrath of the gods. Nkoli's heart pounded with fear. She closed her eyes, expecting the worst. But just then, an order came from the king. The king had heard what was happening and had sent a messenger with a command to spare Nkoli's life. Instead of being killed, she was to be sent to the abandoned part of the village as punishment for her sin, and the gods would be appeased with sacrifices and cleansing. It turned out that some of the women who had seen her earlier had gone to the palace to beg the king for mercy. These women remembered all the kind things Nkoli had done for them and couldn't bear to see her die such a painful death. The king, ever compassionate, was moved by their pleas, and remembering Nkoli's kindness, he decided to save her life. The chief priest of the shrine was furious, but he had to obey the king's order. After all, the king was the highest authority in the land after the gods. In anger, he cursed her unborn child. We shall not bear the misfortune of a woman who has been exempted from facing the punishment of her sin. She has brought a curse upon this land, but her unborn child shall bear this curse instead, he roared in anger. Nkoli was spared and was sent to live in the abandoned part of the village, far away from the people she loved. There, she was to spend the rest of her life, living like an outcast. The people were sad, but it was still better than being stoned to death. After all, there is hope for the living. Nkoli's husband, Nduka, was deeply disappointed when he heard what his wife had done. She could have just waited for me, he cried. He refused to have anything to do with her, saying that she carried a curse from the gods and he didn't want her to bring bad luck to him or his family. Nduka's rejection added to Nkoli's pain, making her feel even more alone and sad. Every day, she would sit in front of her small hut, crying and regretting ever allowing her cravings destroy the happy life she had built. She was an orphan and had no one else except her brother. Every day, she prayed to the gods, asking for mercy and also interceding on behalf of her unborn child. My baby is innocent. Please, spare us, she would cry. In the abandoned part of the village, where Nkoli now lived, a few of her friends still sneaked out to visit and help her in their own small ways. But it was not often. Most of the time, Nkoli was alone facing the challenges of her new life all by herself. As her pregnancy progressed, It became harder for her. She was nearing her delivery date and had no one to support her during this painful and difficult time. Nkoli would often sit and cry for hours, feeling utterly alone and rejected by the world. She always reminded herself that she was the root cause of her misfortune. One morning, Nkoli's friend Uju came to visit her. When she looked at Nkoli, she noticed that Nkoli wasn't really looking okay. "You look like you're going to give birth soon," Uju said. But Nkoli was too weak to even respond. Not long after Uju's arrival, Nkoli went into labor. She cried out in pain. Panic-stricken, Uju ran back to the village to fetch the midwife. But before they could return, Nkoli had already given birth to her baby. It was a baby girl. But something was not right. The baby looked very different and almost abnormal and scary. They stared at the baby with shock in their eyes. Despite their astonishment, the midwife did her duty and cleaned up both Nkoli and her new baby. However, she couldn't shake off the strange feeling about the baby's appearance. By nightfall, the news of Nkoli's strange-looking baby had spread throughout the village. People were whispering and gossiping about the abnormal child. Many assumed that the baby's stature was a result of the curse from the chief priest. The gods seemed to have punished her for the abomination she committed, they whispered among themselves. Nkoli was sad. "Look what I've brought upon my child," she cried. She would sneak out at night, offering several sacrifices to appease the gods of Nri. She prayed for mercy upon her child, but her baby remained that way. Nkoli would hold her baby close, tears streaming down her face. The baby looked different, but to her, the baby was precious and the closest family she had. She knew she had brought this upon the child, and she made a promise to herself and her baby that she would love and take good care of her, no matter what anyone said or thought. Your limitations would never stop you from being what you were destined to be. In your lifetime, you will give hope to people, she would always say to her baby. "Let my wrongs be upon me and not you." Despite her determination, the villagers' gossip didn't stop. Many would come to visit, pretending to welcome the new baby. But in reality, they just wanted to see if the rumors were true. They would stare at the baby, their eyes wide with curiosity and judgment. Nkoli could feel their whispers and sneers, but she tried her best to ignore them. She focused all her energy on loving and caring for her child. Nkoli and her baby, Mma, became objects of ridicule in the village. Many people began to see them as cursed. Can you imagine what she calls a child? A baby that looks like a 90-year-old woman, they would say. That woman must be evil, they concluded. The woman who was once loved by the entire village now found herself alone. No one wanted to have anything to do with her. Whenever people saw her, they judged her and threw ugly words at her. But this never made Nkoli hate her child. She cared for her like it was no one's business. Nkoli named the child Mma, which meant beauty. This made people laugh even more because they thought Mma was the opposite of beautiful. As Mma grew, her mother would always send her out to the village to mix up with other village children. She wanted her daughter to be happy and feel accepted. Mma noticed the way people always stared at her as if she had 4 heads whenever she walked through the village. And no child wanted to be her friend and talk more of playing with her. They all mocked and bullied her, calling her an evil spirit. Whenever they saw her, They would scream, evil spirits, chasing her around the village square. They were overjoyed to watch her sit in the village square crying. You need to see her. Her face looks so funny whenever she cries. One could hardly tell if she were a male or female. To these children, they were having fun. Mma was a big topic in the village. Sometimes, children would visit their home just to mock and throw stones at Mma when Nkoli was not at home. This was a very painful experience for the little girl as she felt alone and dejected. One night, with tears streaming down her face, Mma called out to her mother, "Mama, why do people hate me this way? Why do I look so different?" Nkoli was deeply hurt. She had hoped her daughter would mix with other children and live a normal life. But she had been wrong. She should have known that Mma would never be accepted. She looked nothing like them. She looked sickly, old, and very thin. As she listened to her daughter's painful words, she held her hands and looked deep into her eyes. "You look different because you are special," Nkoli said gently. "People hate what they fear, and they fear your greatness. They fear that you are what they can never be. That's why they hate you. But don't worry, you have me and you are a blessed child." Mma embraced her mother, feeling a bit better after hearing those comforting words. From that day on, Mma stopped leaving the hut. She stayed indoors all day to avoid the villagers mocking her and the children bullying her. But this wasn't a solution, as they soon came to find her. One day, while Nkoli went to the market to sell her farm produce and buy some food for herself and Mma, some wicked children came to make fun of Mma. They hadn't seen her for a while and had hidden themselves close to Nkoli's house, closely monitoring when she would leave, so they could visit her to taunt and torture her for fun, as they usually did. To them, this was just play, and she was their object. They knocked on the door and Mma, thinking it was her mother, opened it. The children then dragged her out and began to push her around and flog her. As Mma cried and pleaded with them to stop, they only flogged her harder, laughing loudly. This was fun for them. They beat her until she lay on the ground very weak. Then they burst into a chant. "What is she, a skeleton, no blood?" the others would reply. "What is she, an evil spirit roaming through our village?" They chanted these cruel songs until they were exhausted. Then they left Mma and ran back home, satisfied that they had punished the evil spirit in their village. When Nkoli returned home, she found her daughter lying in front of the hut, almost lifeless. "Mma!" she shouted, rushing towards her. She lifted Mma up and cried, "Who has done this to you, my child?" She wept bitterly. She ran inside to get some herbs and began to administer them to Mma. For days, Nkoli sat with her daughter in their hut, crying and praying to the gods not to allow her die. Mma was the only thing she had. The gods heard her prayers, and after a few days, Mma began to get better. "Mama," Mma cried after she was fully recovered, "I don't want to stay here anymore. Everyone hates me, and I look different. Please take me away from here," she pleaded. Nkoli knew she had to do something. She had done all she could, and it seemed like no miracle was forthcoming. She couldn't bear coming home one day to find her daughter dead. She needed to move Mma away, out of the village, just to keep her safe. She found someone from a faraway village to build a small hut deep in the forest. She didn't want anyone from the village to find out where she had hidden her daughter. She couldn't bear the thought of losing Mma. No matter what she looked like, she was still her child. Nkoli visited her daughter frequently, bringing food and keeping her company whenever she could. She was careful not to let anyone follow her, as she didn't want anyone discovering the hideout and hurting Mma. Living in the forest, Mma felt very lonely. When her mother wasn't with her, she would sit in front of her hut, looking so sad. One day, as she sat in front of her hut gazing at the trees in the forest, a tune just dropped in her heart, and she began to sing. She sang and sang. She was so happy. She realized that singing made her peaceful and calm. It was as if all her problems disappeared instantly, and in those moments she felt free. This discovery brought Mma great joy. Every day, she would sing and dance around the forest, feeling like the trees and animals were her audience. The birds would stop chirping, and leaves would stop rustling, as if they were listening to her beautiful songs. Mma would sing until she was tired. Then she would go back to her hut and fall asleep. Over time, Mma began to enjoy her life in the forest. She found freedom there, away from the harsh words and cruel actions of the villagers. In the forest, she could be herself. No one was there to throw stones and call her names. She could dance and sing to her heart's content, and the forest became her magical kingdom. The days passed, and Mma's song grew more beautiful. She sang about the trees, the flowers, and the animals that lived around her. She made up stories and sang them out loud, imagining herself as part of the forest's wonderful world. She would twirl and spin, her laughter echoing through the trees. The forest, once a place of fear and hiding, became a place of joy and happiness for Mma. Nkoli, though worried about her daughter's loneliness, was relieved to see Mma's happiness. Every time she visited, she found Mma smiling and content. Mma would run to her mother, singing about her day and the new things she had discovered. Nkoli listened with a heart full of love, happy that her daughter had found a way to be joyful despite everything. Meanwhile, in that same kingdom lived a very wealthy and kind king named King Dike. King Dike was not just rich. He had a heart full of love and generosity. His people loved and respected him deeply because he was truly a great king. He always listened to their problems and tried his best to help everyone. Under King Dike's rule, the entire kingdom flourished. This means that everything grew and became better. The fields were full of healthy crops. The markets were busy with people selling and buying goods, and the rivers were clear and full of fish. The villages in the kingdom experienced rapid and visible growth. Houses were built, schools were established, and the roads were well maintained. Even the smallest village in the kingdom was not neglected. King Dike made sure that every single village, no matter how small, got the attention it deserved, and help is needed. King Dike loved to travel around his kingdom to see how his people were doing. He would ride in his grand chariots, waving to everyone he met. The villagers would cheer and wave back, feeling very proud to have such a wonderful king. He would stop to talk to the children, asking them about their studies and dreams. They would listen to the elders, respecting their wisdom and learning from their experiences. He was married to a stunningly beautiful woman named Oji. The king and Queen Oji loved each other deeply, and their love was evident in everything they did. They ruled the kingdom together, and the king never made any important decision without first discussing it with his beloved queen. Their partnership was strong and filled with mutual respect and support. The king and queen were overjoyed when they had their first child, a son whom they named Ralu. He was not only their first child, but also their only child. Despite many attempts, Queen Oji was unable to conceive again after Ralu's birth. However, the king loved his queen so much that he refused to take another wife, even though it was customary for kings to have as many wives as they wanted, especially if they wanted more heirs. His love for Oji was unwavering and he valued her above all else. Ralu was the apple of their eyes. They cherished him and did everything they could to raise him properly and protect him. Ralu grew up surrounded by love and care. He had a curious mind and a brave heart, always eager for new adventures. From a young age, he was fascinated by the world beyond the palace. The king and queen were always very protective of him because he was their only child and the heir to the throne. But Prince Ralu would often beg his parents to let him go out and explore the kingdom. He loved touring the village, talking to the people, learning about their culture and riding through the forest. The king and queen, understanding their son's adventurous spirit, allowed him to explore under the watchful eyes of trusted guards. One of Prince Ralu's favorite places was the quiet forest. He loved the tall trees, the chirping birds, and the peaceful rivers. He felt a special connection with nature. The sound of the flowing water and the rustling of leaves made him feel calm and happy. He would often sit by the rivers, watching the fish swim and listening to the gentle sounds of the forest. Prince Ralu also loved the mountains. Oh, how he loved those mountains! He loved climbing them and sitting at the top, admiring the beauty of his kingdom. From the mountain, he could see everything: the villages, the forests, and the rivers. He felt like he was on top of the world. In the evenings, he would sit there quietly, watching the sunset and enjoying the breathtaking view. The beauty of the kingdom spread out before him and made him feel incredibly happy. Even though the king and queen worried about him, they knew how much he loved these adventures. They saw how happy it made him, and they couldn't help but smile when they saw the joy in his eyes. Prince Ralu's love for nature and his adventurous spirit reminded them of themselves when they were young. Prince Ralu's love for nature and adventure brought him closer to his people and his kingdom. He understood their lives and their needs, and they knew that he cared deeply about them. He was not just a prince, he was a friend and a protector to everyone in the kingdom. The king and the queen were very proud of their son. They knew that one day he would be a great king just like his father, and the people of the kingdom looked forward to that day, knowing that with the Prince Ralu as their future king, their kingdom would continue to be a place of happiness, growth, and beauty. But then, something unexpected happened. One evening, Prince Ralu was riding through the forest as he usually did. He felt adventurous and decided to explore a part of the forest he had never seen before. As he was riding, something caught his eyes. It was a very big Udara tree and was full of ripe golden fruits. Prince Ralu's eyes lit up with excitement. Udara was his favorite, and he loved it more than anything else. Without a second thought, he jumped down from his horse and ran to the tree. There he picked up one of the ripe Udara fruits and took a bite. The fruit melted in his mouth like honey. It was the sweetest, most delicious fruit he had ever tasted. He closed his eyes and savored the taste, feeling more joy. He thought to himself, how wonderful it would be to enjoy this fruit every day. Eager to have more of the fruits, Prince Ralu picked more and placed them in a bag. He then mounted his horse and rode back home, feeling incredibly happy and content. He couldn't wait to relax and enjoy the rest of the fruits he had picked. He couldn't resist the urge to eat the remaining fruits, so he quickly devoured them as soon as he got to his room. Feeling satisfied, he drifted off to sleep. But the next morning, everything changed. The prince woke up feeling strange. As he got out of bed, he noticed something was very different. He walked over to the mirror and was horrified by what he saw. A loud scream escaped his lips. Hearing the scream, his mother, the queen, rushed into his room. She nearly screamed her lungs out when she saw him, terrified by the figure standing before her. It looked like an ape, or something else she couldn't recognize. But when it spoke, she realized it was her son. "My son," she cried, moving closer to him. "What has happened to you?" The prince, just as confused as she was, began to cry. "I just woke up this way," he said, through his tears. The queen was heartbroken. "Stay here while I get your father. No one else must see you like this." She hurried to find the king, her heart pounding with fear. When the king saw his son, he was equally shocked. What could have happened, he asked, bewildered. They decided they needed answers, and quickly the king sent for the chief priest, telling the messenger that it was an urgent matter. The chief priest arrived at the palace as fast as he could. He was led into the king's private chambers, away from prying eyes. The king explained the situation, and the chief priest immediately began his rituals. He performed incantations and spoke in the mysterious language of the gods. The king, queen, and the prince watched anxiously, hoping for a solution. After a long time, the chief priest shook his head and finally stopped. He looked at them with a grave eyes. "The prince has eaten the fruits of the spirits in the evil forest," he revealed. "The spirit has cast a spell on him as punishment to what he has done." What Prince Ralu didn't know was that the Udara tree he had found was no ordinary tree. It was a sacred tree, and its fruits were known as the fruits of the spirits. These fruits were meant only for the gods, and no mortal was supposed to taste them. Eating these fruits could bring great trouble to anyone who was not a spirit. The queen let out a loud wail. "I'm finished though, my son." "What do we do now?" the king asked, desperate for solution. The chief priest shook his head. "I don't know. The gods have refused to say anything else. We must try to appease them. They are very angry with the prince." The news was like a heavy stone in their hearts. The king and the queen were overwhelmed with grief and worry. They knew they had to act fast to save their son. The queen hugged the prince lightly, her tears wetting his monstrous face. The king, trying to stay strong, decided they would prepare offerings and perform rituals to calm the spirits of the forest. The days passed, and the palace was filled with the sound of prayers and ritual. The king and queen did everything they could, think of. To please the gods, he offered sacrifices, sang sacred songs, and even asked the villagers to join in the prayers. The whole kingdom was concerned, but they kept the true reason for the rituals a secret to protect the prince's dignity. All their efforts to restore the prince to his normal state seemed to be in vain. The last solution preferred by the chief priest was that only true love could break the evil spell on the prince. Udara was a fruit of love, and only love could break its spell. But everyone knew it was an impossible mission. Of course, who would love the prince in this state? It was scary to even look upon. I'm afraid he would have to die this way if he doesn't find true love, the chief priest said. The royal family was devastated. The prince was confined to a room, and he was overwhelmed with frustration and sadness. He had cried until he could cry no more. Weeks turned into months, and the king and queen became increasingly despondent. Despite following all the chief priest's instruction, nothing changed. In their desperation, they decided to wait, holding on to the hope that one day a miracle would occur. The prince was kept in a secret room within the palace, hidden from everyone. No one was allowed to enter that room except the queen, who took it upon herself to care for her son. The queen knew that if the villagers discovered the prince's monstrous transformation, the king's younger brother Agu would seize the opportunity to claim the throne. Without an heir, their rule was precarious. The palace, once filled with laughter and activity, became eerily quiet. The corridors echoed with silence, and the cheerful atmosphere was replaced with an air of gloom. It was as if a dark cloud had settled over the royal household, making it feel as though the king had already passed away. Years went by, and the villagers started to notice the prince's absence. Questions began to circulate. It had been a long time since anyone had seen the prince. During the last few yam festivals, the prince had not made an appearance, and the villagers seemed to miss him a lot. They missed seeing him parade through the village with his charming smile and regal demeanor. One day, as a group of maidens walked to the stream, they talked among themselves. "The prince has been missing for so long," one of them said. "Do you think he's still alive?" "And what kind of question is that?" Another lady hushed her. "How can you speak such words? The prince is not dead." "How do you know?" Another interrupted her. Despite the attempts to hush such talk, rumors continued to spread like wildfire through the village. People whispered in hushed tones, speculating about the fate of the prince. The uncertainty and mystery only fueled their curiosity and concern. One evening, Agu decided to visit the king. After being offered kola, the king spoke. "What do I owe this visit, brother?" he asked, his tone weary. Agu was the king's stepbrother, and he is the only brother the king has. "I'm worried about you and your throne, Your Majesty," Agu replied. "I want to know what has happened to the prince. There are so many rumors flying around the village, and it has been like a very long time since I last saw the prince." The king's eyes narrowed. "Have you come to mock me, Agu? I know you, and I know you do not have my best interest at heart." "My son is fine, and everyone will see him when the time is right." Agu, sensing the king's anger, bowed slightly. "I mean no disrespect, my king, I only wish for the well-being of our family and our kingdom." The king laughed. "I know you, Agu. And when did the well-being of our family and kingdom begin to mean so much to you? You were just a baby when our father died and I became the king. But you grew up and chose to stand against me. You want this throne badly, and you think I don't know? But what worries me is what you intend to do with it." He dismissed Agu's concerns, but inside, his heart was heavy with worry. He knew that the longer the prince remained hidden, the more dangerous the situation became. The villagers' curiosity was growing, and Agu's ambitions were becoming more apparent. The queen, seeing the toll it was taking on her husband, tried to comfort him, but she too was deeply troubled. Every morning, she would visit the prince in his hidden room, taking food to him and sitting with him for hours. She would tell him stories of the outside world, trying to keep his spirits up. The prince listened, his heart aching with longing for the life he once had. He missed the sun on his face, the laughter of the villagers, and the feeling of freedom. One particular quiet night, the queen sat beside the prince, her eyes filled with tears. "We will find a way, my son," she whispered. "I promise you, we will find a way to make things right." The prince nodded, but inside he felt a deep sadness. He knew his mother was trying to be strong for him, but he could see the pain in her eyes. He wanted nothing more than to be normal again, to walk among the villagers and feel their love and respect. Agu, the king's brother, couldn't stop thinking about his recent visit to the palace. The king's words, "Have you come to mock me?" kept echoing in his ears. What does the king mean by that statement? And why was he hiding the prince? Agu had noticed that the king looked lean and unhappy. Something was definitely wrong, and he needed to find out what it was. One evening, Agu's wife Oge noticed her husband's troubled expression and approached him. "My husband," she said gently, "you look troubled. What is bothering you? You can tell me anything." Agu sighed and looked at his wife. After a moment of hesitation, he decided to confide in her. "I think there is something about the prince that the king is hiding. He may even be dead." Oge's eyes widened with excitement. "If something is wrong with the prince, then you become the next king, right?" "Yes," Agu responded, his voice trailing off. Oge's eyes sparkled with ambition. "We can't take any chances. We need to find out the truth and expose the king. This is the opportunity we've always been waiting for, and now the gods have made it easy for us. I wish the prince were dead, and I can't wait to be the queen and live in the royal mansion." "But the king built it himself," Agu pointed out. "He built it with your father's wealth and money. We are only taking what belongs to us," Oge insisted. Agu was silent for a moment, deep in thought. "How do we go about this?" he finally asked. "Trust me," Oge said with a confident smile. "I have a plan." She leaned in closer and began to share her scheme with her husband. Agu listened, his excitement growing as she spoke. They would find a spy to disguise as a beggar and approach the palace, begging the king for a job. The king, known for his kindness, would offer the beggar a position. The spy would then work his way into the hearts of the king and queen, uncovering their secrets. Agu smiled, feeling a surge of excitement and determination. He was certain that the king was hiding something, and now they had a plan to uncover the truth. The next day, Oge and Agu set their plan into motion. They sought out a man named Obinna, known for his cunning ability to blend into any situation. They explained their plan to him, and he agreed to help in exchange for a promise of wealth and power once Agu became king. Obinna transformed himself into a beggar, with tattered clothes and a pitiful appearance. He made his way to the palace gates, where he pleaded with the guards to let him see the king. "Please, I am just a poor man looking for work. I beg you to let me speak to the king," he said, his voice trembling with faint desperation. The guards, moved by his plea, took him to see the king. True to his kind nature, the king offered Obinna a job in the palace. Obinna expressed his gratitude and began working in the palace, slowly earning the trust of the king and queen. It had been a long time, and the prince's patience was wearing thin. He was tired of staying hidden in his secluded room and longed to experience the outside world again. He missed walking around the village, exploring the forest, and admiring the breathtaking view from the mountains. One day, he thought to himself, "I can't stay here forever." The prince decided it was time to act. The queen usually brought him food every morning, and after that she wouldn't see him again until the next morning. He realized that he could use this time to his advantage. When the palace was quiet, he would sneak out through a hidden passage in the palace wall and escape into the forest. He had been confined for 15 years, and he couldn't bear it any longer. The prince began sneaking out of the palace to enjoy nature as he used to. The first time he stepped into the forest, the feeling was overwhelming. He couldn't contain his excitement. He missed the outside world so much and wished he could explore everywhere all at once. He headed for the mountains, his favorite place, and climbed to the top. Sitting there, he admired the beautiful kingdom spread out before him. He wished he could walk through his village again and see all the beautiful familiar faces. The forest looked just as it always had, full of life and beauty. As he sat there, lost in thoughts, he suddenly heard a voice singing in the forest. He turned his head, trying to find the source of the beautiful melody, but it seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at all. The voice was like nothing he had ever heard before, soft as silk, yet powerful enough to stir deep emotions within him. Its melodies melted his heart and brought tears to his eyes. He sat there, quietly listening, letting the enchanting music fill his soul. When he had finally had his fill of the forest and the music, he headed back to the palace, wondering who could be responsible for singing such a beautiful song in the forest. That night, the voice continued to echo in his mind, and for the first time in years, he slept soundly. The next day, he set out for the forest, but this time, he not only wanted to enjoy nature but also wanted to experience a magical singing voice in the forest, and that day was one of its kind. It was exceptional, and he couldn't resist the urge to seek out the singing goddess in the forest. Her voice made him feel alive, and he really wanted to see who it was. With determination, the prince stood up and began to follow the enchanting voice. He walked deeper into the forest, his heart pounding with anticipation. The melody grew louder and more beautiful as he followed it. He moved through the trees, over streams and across meadows, always keeping the sound in his ears. As he walked, he thought about the singer. Who could possess such a magical voice? He imagined what she might look like. A beautiful goddess of the forest, perhaps. His curiosity and excitement grew with each step. He had never felt such a strong desire to meet someone before. Finally, he reached a clearing in the forest where the voice seemed to be the strongest. He looked around, but there was no one in sight. The song continued, filling the air with its haunting beauty. He stood still, listening, and then called out, "Who are you? Please, let me see you." For a moment, there was silence. Mma heard the voice and shivered. For years, she hadn't seen any human in this forest except her mother, who was sick and wasn't really as frequent as she used to be. And she also didn't want to be seen. She hid behind the trees. "If you are human, please let me see you." Her voice shaking, she replied, "It's better you don't see me, as I look so ugly and scary. I am human, but I look different." The prince laughed. "I don't look any better either. In fact, I'm sure you can't even look worse than me. I still want to see you." It was a mix of fear and curiosity that made her look. Her heart jumped. The voice sounded human, but the creature before her looked like an ape. Cold shivers ran down her spine, and fear shook her to the core. Was he going to harm her? What would he do if he found her? Her mind raced with panic until she heard his voice again. "I'm not going to hurt you," the prince called out gently. "I just love your songs and want to see you and spend some time with you. I am harmless, I promise." She hesitated, but his words sounded sincere and kind. Could he be a special spirit, she wondered. Decided to trust him, she slowly stepped out from behind the trees, her heart pounding. The prince was taken aback when he saw her. She was the complete opposite of what he had imagined. Her voice was so powerful and beautiful, but she looked so skinny, tiny and ugly. It was hard to believe that such a wonderful voice could come from this weird figure. He wondered if she was even human. Mma and the prince sat under the tree a few feet apart, both feeling nervous and curious. They didn't say anything at first, just stealing glances at each other. Each of them were trying to understand the other, wondering why they looked so strange. After a while, the prince spoke softly. "I know you must be curious about me, but I am human. I've been hiding for many years. I look this way because a spell was cast on me by the evil spirits of the forest for eating their precious fruits. I couldn't bear to stay locked in a room anymore. I enjoy my adventures in the forest and have decided to come see it again. But then I heard your voice. It made me feel something that I've never felt in a long time. I just want us to be friends." Mma listened quietly, her fear slowly melting away. "I was also cursed for something my mother did when she was pregnant with me. I looked different and couldn't bear the pain and mockery from the villagers. I almost got killed at some point, and then my mother decided to hide me in the forest. I've been living here for a very long time," she replied. Singing makes me feel happy and free. They continued to sit in silence for a while, each lost in their own thoughts. The forest around them seemed to hold its breath, listening to their unspoken words. Finally, the prince looked at Umma and said, "I may look different, but inside I'm still a person. I need someone to talk to and share my days with." Umma's heart softened. She could see the sadness in his eyes and she felt a deep empathy for him. "I will be your friend," she said quietly. "We can meet and talk, and I will sing for you whenever you want. I don't live too far from here." A smile spread across the prince's face. "Thank you," he said, his voice filled with gratitude. From that day on, Umma and the prince met regularly in the forest. They talked about their lives, their dreams, and their fears. Umma sang her beautiful songs and the prince listened, feeling a warmth in his heart that he hadn't felt in years. As time went by, their friendship grew stronger. Umma learned to look beyond the prince's appearance, seeing the kind and gentle person he truly was. The prince, in turn, cherished Umma's company and the joy her music brought him. He could see that beneath this ugly surface lay the most beautiful hearts he had ever seen. Their meetings became the highlights of their days. Umma would sing and the prince would share stories of his life before the course. They laughed together, cried together, and found comfort in each other's presence. The forest, once a place of loneliness and fear, became a haven of friendship and hope for both Umma and the prince. They found in each other a bond that transcended appearances, a connection that brought light into their lives. Meanwhile, the spy Obinna was very busy trying his best to win the hearts of the king. Obinna was a very skillful flute player. Whenever he noticed that the king was sad, he would go to the palace and play his flute. The sweet soothing music touched the king's heart always and helped him calm down. Obinna was always trying his best to make the king happy. Sometimes he would tell funny jokes that made the king laugh. Other times he would tell the king interesting stories or offer him words of encouragement. Obinna was just too kind, and the king grew to love him very much. The king could hardly finish a sentence without mentioning Obinna. "I love that young man so much. He always makes me happy, and I wish he was my son," the king said to the queen one day. But the queen was not happy. "I do not like that young man," she said. "He is good and all, but I see the way his eyes move around everywhere. Don't you think he's here on a mission? We do not know him from anywhere, and suddenly he's here, being all nice and perfect." The king laughed. "Honey, I think you are stressed out and worry too much. I'll call Obinna to play his magical flute so you can feel better. Obinna is God sent to us, and you think too much." This was how the king dismissed the queen's concerns, and Obinna continued his evil assignment in the palace. He was so good at it. Obinna's plans was to get as close to the king as possible. He used his charm and musical talents to gain the king's trust. Every day, he would find new ways to please the king. He brought flowers from the garden, prepared special teas, and even helped the king with his daily task. The more Obinna did, the more the king adored him. The queen, however, continued to observe Obinna with suspicion. She watched him closely, noticing the little things that seemed off. His eagerness to please, his constant presence, and the way he seemed to know just what to say and do. She couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to Obinna than met the eye. But then, she couldn't force her instincts on her husband. He loved and trusted Obinna so much, and she just prayed he was right. One evening, the king had a particularly rough day. He was worried about the kingdom and the mysterious absence of his son. Obinna noticed the king's distress and immediately brought out his flute. He played a soft, calming tune that filled the room with peace. The king closed his eyes and let the music wash over him, feeling all his worries melt away. After the performance, Obinna sat by the king and said, "Your Majesty, you are a great king and your people love you, and you have done so much for the kingdom. Sometimes, even the greatest needs to rest and trust that everything will be alright." The king smiled and patted Obinna on the neck. "Thank you, Obinna. Your words and music always bring me much comfort. I don't know what I would do without you." "Yes, Your Majesty," Obinna continued, his voice gentle. "My father, before he died, would always say to me that even the strongest sometimes need comfort. You can tell me anything whenever you feel like it. I'll be here to support you." The king was silent as tears rolled down his cheeks. "I have worked so hard to build this kingdom and I can't bear to lose it," he said, his voice heavy with emotion. Obinna pretended to be confused. "Why would you lose your kingdom?" he asked. But before he could get an answer, the king stood up abruptly and ran into his private chamber, leaving Obinna alone. Meanwhile, Prince Ralu and Mma continued their friendship in the forest. Mma would sing and dance around the trees, her voice filling the air with beautiful melodies, while Ralu sat nearby enjoying her songs. The music brought him a sense of peace and took away his troubles. When Mma wasn't singing, Ralu would take her up the mountains and they would sit together watching the village below. This thrilled Mma as she hadn't seen her village for 15 years. The sight of it filled her with indescribable excitement. On the mountain, they would share stories about their lives. Ralu felt deep sorrow when he heard how Mma had been bullied by the village children. Despite their growing closeness, Ralu kept his identity as a prince a secret from Mma, fearing it might change their friendship. One evening, the king sat in his palace feeling especially weary and sent for Obinna to play his flute. Obinna, eager to please, came in immediately and began playing and praising the king. That day, his performance was exceptional and the king's spirits were lifted. After he finished, the king asked Obinna to sit by him. The king then opened up, sharing his deepest secrets, one known only by himself, the queen, and the chief priest. Obinna was shocked by what he heard. Tears rolled down his cheeks as he held the king's hand. "Your Majesty, I'm so sorry to hear this. This must be too much for you to bear, but be strong. I pray a miracle happens." The king smiled weakly. "I fear we've done our best and nothing has worked," he said. They both sat in silence, the king worrying about his kingdom and Obinna processing what he had just learned. That night, under the cover of darkness, Obinna sneaked out to the palace to meet with Agu, the king's brother. He relayed everything he had heard. Agu was astonished. "You mean the prince now looks like an ape?" he asked, a grin spreading across his face. He laughed excitedly. "This is great news. For this job well done, I will pay you more." Obinna nodded, feeling a mix of excitement and guilt. "When I become the king," Agu boasted, "I will make you my chief advisor. You are so wise and perfect." The plan was working perfectly, but seeing the king's pain up close had stirred something inside Obinna. He pushed those feelings aside, focusing on the reward. Agu handed him a pouch of gold coins and they discussed their next steps. As days passed, Obinna continued to charm the king and gather more information, while Ralu and Mma's bond grew stronger in the forest. Ralu cherished his time with Mma, finding solace in her presence and her songs. Mma in turn found joy and companionship in Ralu, though she still didn't know his true identity. The king had grown so fond of Obinna that one day, during one of their usual discussions, he looked at Obinna with great affection and said, "I wish you were my son, or that there was a way I could just adopt you. I love you so much. You are so wise and you've been a great help to me. From now on, you are no longer a servant in this palace." Tears welled up in Obinna's eyes, but inside, his mind was racing. A brilliant yet greedy idea struck him. If the king were to adopt him, he could become the next king. He would have more riches than Agu had ever promised him. His eyes gleamed with ambition and greed as he realized the opportunity before him. He needed a plan. He had worked hard to gain the king's trust, and now it was time to be rewarded handsomely. That night, Obinna couldn't sleep. He lay awake dreaming of his future as a new king and the immense wealth he would acquire. An idea began to form in his mind. He would betray Agu and reveal his secrets to the king. This would eliminate Agu as a threat, and the king would banish him from the village. Obinna chuckled to himself, pleased with his cunning idea. "I'm so smart," he said. Unknown to Obinna, Agu had already taken steps to secure his own power. Firstly, he had met with the village elders and shared the secrets about the prince with them. He bribed them with many coins and promised them greater rewards if they supported his claim to the throne. "It is my turn to be king, since the current king has no heir," Agu declared. On the day of the new Yam festival, the whole village will learn the truth and the king will be ashamed. "When I become king, I will build you all modern houses and give you vast lands. All I ask for is your support." Agu was manipulative and persuasive. How can the king hide the truth about his son? From even you, the elders, he questioned. He has fooled everyone, showing no regard for you. The elders, swayed by Agu's words and bribes, agreed to support him. They repeatedly asked him if he was telling the truth about the prince, and Agu assured them he was. The New Yam festival was only a few days away, and Agu had chosen that day to disgrace the king and dethrone him if he did not present the prince. He didn't fully trust Obinna and felt that Obinna might betray him. So, from the beginning, he had planted a spy to monitor Obinna's actions in the palace. She was a girl, and her name was Amaka, a beautiful palace maiden who had caught Obinna's eye. Obinna had even promised to marry her once he had enough money, and left the palace. That night, Obinna, feeling overjoyed by his impending success, drank a lot of palm wine and went straight to Amaka's chamber. She welcomed him warmly and offered him more drinks. As Obinna became intoxicated, he let slip his wicked plan. "Agu thinks he's smart," he laughed. "But I'm smarter. The king loves me so much now and he sees me as his son. I will get Agu out of the picture and become the king. Then you will be my queen." Amaka smiled as she poured him more wine, but inside she was calculating. The next day she reported everything to Agu. Furious but determined, Agu realized he needed to act quickly to neutralize Obinna. He couldn't afford to let his plan be ruined. Agu thanked Amaka profusely. He had promised to make her his second wife once he secured the throne. He began plotting his next move. He was going to use Obinna's betrayal to his advantage. He was going to eliminate him before he ruined all his plans, and he needed to act quickly. Meanwhile, Obinna continued to enjoy the king's favor. The king showered him with gifts and privileges, seeing him almost as a son. Obinna felt invincible, unaware of the storm brewing around him. The New Yam Festival was just 2 days away, and it was usually a very big event in the village. There were lots of masquerades of different kinds, lots of music, dances, foods. The villagers would dress in the most beautiful attire, and the palace was always bustling. It was a great event that kept everyone in high spirits. Agu could not stop smiling. He just couldn't wait to see the king broken and publicly embarrassed. He had sent for Obinna, and he sat in front of his hut patiently waiting for him. When Obinna arrived, Agu told him he had discovered some gold in a part of the forest and needed them both to find a place to hide it. We could sell it and make enough money out of it, he said to Obinna. He knew Obinna was greedy, and this was a good bait to trap him. Obinna was excited in his heart. He thought to himself that since he was going to eliminate Agu, he would have all the gold to himself. He would be the richest king that ever lived. When they got to the forest, Agu showed him a spot and asked him to dig it. As Obinna bent to dig, Agu took out a machete and cut off Obinna's head. He dug the soil and buried him there. There was one more thing he needed to do. There was no point keeping Prince Ralu alive. Obinna had told him that he usually sneaked to the forest every day. He was going to hire a hunter to drill him, kill him, and then bring his dead body to him. Agu was bloodthirsty and wanted power badly. He needed no one to stand on his way of becoming the king. Plus the expression on the king's face when he sees the dead body of his monstrous son would be the highlight of the event. He wanted to see him cry like a baby. His plans worked out smoothly. He got a hunter from another town and paid him handsomely. That evening, the prince was heading to the forest as usual, excited to meet with his now best friend Mma, when he heard gunshots. It pierced deep into his belly, and 2 more bullets came and knocked him down. He lay lifeless on the floor. Mma heard the first gunshot and ran out. She hid behind the tree and watched. She almost screamed when she saw Ralu slump into the ground. She waited, and when she heard no more sounds and footsteps, she ran out and held Ralu. She cried, her voice echoing through the forest. "Please don't leave me," she begged, holding him and hoping he would come back to life. Her heart shattered into pieces. It seemed as if her spirit was leaving her. She had grown to love him so much and couldn't bear the pain of losing him. As she cried, she closed her eyes and burst into singing. She sang, her voice shaking. The forest shook as pains echoed through her. She poured her soul out through her songs. Suddenly, there was a bright light in the forest and the leaves began to shake. The wounds of the prince began to heal immediately, and then someone touched her, drawing her back to consciousness. When she opened her eyes, she was shocked to see a very handsome man sitting before her and smiling. She looked around, searching for the prince, but he was sitting right on the spot where Ralu lay. "Where is he?" she asked. Then the young man spoke. It was Ralu. She had heard his voice. Tears ran down her eyes as she watched him with a shocked expression. She wondered what had happened to him. Mma didn't know that her voice carried a healing power. She could cure all manner of sickness and even resurrect the dead with her songs. She searched for the bullet injury and everything was gone. When she had poured out her soul in tears, it sent out a signal immediately. She was in love with the prince and only love could break the evil spell. Prince Ralu was now entirely free. Mma was glad that Ralu was now free, but a rush of sadness washed over her. He was going to leave her and go back to his normal life. Then she would die alone in the forest. Except for her mom, who visited her occasionally, she was alone. The prince, reading her thoughts, swept her into his arms. "You think I'm going to leave you? Never. You made me feel alive when I was dying inside. Trust me, I see you. Your heart is the most beautiful thing in the world. You saved my life. I don't know, but I know you are a precious gift, and I can't do life without you." He held her hands and said, "I don't know how this may sound to you, but I fell in love with you." Mma's eyes widened in shock. "You love me?" Then he gently pulled himself out of her embrace and tilted her head up to stare into her eyes. Behold, standing before him was the most beautiful maiden he had ever seen in his entire life. They were both shocked and amazed as they looked at themselves, marveling at these miracles. Mma looked so normal and beautiful. They couldn't hold in their excitement as they both screamed with joy, tears running down their cheeks. Mma sang and danced around the trees happily as Prince Ralu watched her with a big smile on his face. That moment was just everything for the both of them. Suddenly, they heard footsteps. At first, Mma thought it was her mother, but then they saw a hunter holding a gun and coming towards their direction. Quickly, they hid behind a large tree, watching cautiously. It was a hunter hired by Agu. His job was to kill the prince and bring back his body. But after shooting the prince, he had left the body in the forest and fled. Agu was furious. "What evidence do I show the villagers? How do they believe me? Are you trying to ruin my plans? I swear by the gods, if you don't find that body before the festival, I will kill you myself. You know what I'm capable of." Agu's ruthless threats terrified the hunter. He scrambled back into the forest, scared of what Agu might do to him. It was either he found the body or he faced certain death. The hunter returned to the spot where he thought he had shot the prince and searched frantically. He looked around the bushes and under the trees, but there was no body. Fear gripped him. What had happened? Did an animal come and eat him quickly? "I'm finished," he exclaimed, placing his hands on his head. He sat on the ground and cried out in despair. Suddenly, the prince approached him. "Young man," he called out. The hunter, startled, looked up to see the prince holding his gun. In his panic, the hunter had dropped his gun on the floor, and the prince picked it up. The prince could see the fear in the hunter's eyes. He was the same man who had shot him. "Please, have mercy on me," the hunter pleaded with the prince. "And why should I do that?" the prince asked, "seeing that you almost killed me." "I have never seen you before," the hunter said, still wondering who this strange man was. The prince smiled. "I am Ralu, the son of King Dike," he whispered, not wanting Mma to hear him. He wanted to surprise her. The hunter's mouth dropped open in shock. "Tell me who it was that sent you to kill me, and I will spare your life." The hunter confessed everything about Agu and his evil plan. "You owe me your life now," the prince said to the hunter. "I have a new plan." Back in the village, Agu was restless. Night had fallen and the hunter had not yet returned. His wife served him dinner, but he refused to eat. She saw how disturbed he was. "My king," she called softly to her husband, "please eat your food. Our clothes are ready for tomorrow, and I'm not giving up. I know you will be king and our son will succeed you. The prince is dead, and if his body isn't found, it will confirm the rumors that he died long ago." Agu looked at his wife and smiled. "You see why I married you? You are not only beautiful but also very smart. You will be my queen when I become king. Come and eat with me." His sorrow immediately turned into joy as he saw a way to turn the situation to his advantage. They both ate, filled with anticipation for the next day's event. Meanwhile, Prince Ralo and the hunter were putting their plans into action. The next morning, the village was alive with excitement for the New Yam festival. The palace was bustling with preparations. Agu, confident that the prince was dead, was ready to make his move. He planned to publicly embarrass the king and take the throne for himself. At the festival, the villagers gathered in their finest clothes, the air filled with music and smell of delicious food. Agu waited for the perfect moment to reveal his claim. He had the elders on his side, convinced by his promise of wealth and power. As the festivities reached their peak, Agu stood up and called for everyone's attention. "My fellow villagers," he began, "I have a great announcement to make." Just then, the hunter who had been hiding in the crowd stepped forward, feigning excitement. "Agu," he called out, "I have found the body of the prince. You can move on with the original plan. The king will be so shocked." Agu's eyes glistened with excitement as he felt luck was finally on his side. He cleared his throat and addressed the crowd. "My people, for 15 years we have not seen our prince. And the law of our land states that the king must present an heir after 30 years of his reign. It is true we know the prince, but where is he? This year marks the 30th reign of the king, and for the past 15 years the king has kept us in the dark regarding the prince's whereabouts. We need to be assured that our kingdom is in good hands, and that its continuity is guaranteed. If the prince is alive, let the king tell us now. If he is alive, let him show us the prince. And if not, I, Agu, will show you what our prince looks like and prove that this man we call king is not worthy of our trust. He's just selfish." The king became terrified, his heart pounding so hard. It felt like it might leap out of his chest. This was going to be the biggest disgrace he had ever faced. To make matters worse, the prince was missing. They had discovered his absence that morning, but had decided not to raise an alarm until after the ceremony. Could it be that Agu had kidnapped the prince? The thought chilled him to the bone. The queen was equally terrified, her face pale with fear. Seeing the fear in the king's eyes, Agu felt a surge of excitement. This was more than he had hoped for. He could only imagine the chaos that would ensue when the body of the monster prince was revealed to the people. After a pause, Agu spoke again. "You've seen it, my people. Since the king won't tell us anything about the prince, relax. May I present to you the prince of our kingdom, Prince Ralo." Everyone looked up with great anticipation, eager to see the prince. The king stood up immediately, tears streaming down his face. The royal guards, standing in a straight line, marched out of the palace. Agu watched in confusion, wondering what was happening. He had expected the hunter to simply bring out the prince's body. This hunter can be amusing at times, he chuckled to himself. Then a loud shout rang out. Long live the prince! Long live the prince! Long live the prince! Before the crowd, on a white horse, sat Prince Raleigh, looking handsome and radiant. The king and queen recognized their son instantly and screamed with joy as they marveled at the miracle before them. Agu's face was a picture of shock and disbelief. The hunter had betrayed him, and perhaps Obinna had too. He tried to flee, but the villagers held him back. The people were overjoyed to see their beloved prince after so many years, and the shouts of joy continued for a long time. When the excitement finally died down, Prince Raleigh stood and addressed the people. My dear villagers, he began, his voice strong and clear. I know you have many questions about my absence. For years, I was cursed and hidden away. But thanks today, I'm alive and healthy again. The crowd listened intently, hanging on to every word. Raleigh continued, Agu has betrayed us all. He sought to take the throne by deceit and treachery. He hired a hunter to kill me, but fate had other plans. This man who stands before you is not worthy of trust or leadership. The crowd murmured in agreement, their faith in their prince and king restored. Agu fell on his knees, crying and begging for forgiveness. But the king was furious. He ordered that Agu be taken away and banished from the village forever. The prince continued, in my days of pain and solitude, I found my soulmate. She is the reason why I stand here today. Our stories were both sad, as we both lived under the curses of the gods. But our love for each other broke the spell of the curses hanging on our necks. She is not only a gift to me, but will be a gift to us all. Mother, Father, and my beloved people, I present to you today my bride-to-be, the daughter of Nkoli, who was punished and sent to the abandoned part of the village, mocked by everyone, till her mother hid her away in the forest to protect her. In her, I found happiness. She is no other person than Mma. Immediately, Mma stepped out. The villagers could not believe their eyes. She was so beautiful. Her beauty was nothing they had ever seen before. They all watched in disbelief as the prince swept her into his arms. Mma shed tears. She didn't know the man she had been with all through in the forest was the prince of her village. What a transition, she thought. From the forest to the palace. It was like a dream to her. She had never imagined that this day would come. The prince whispered words of assurance to her ears. The villagers remembered her, and also recalled how she suddenly disappeared. Today, she has appeared to be the bride of the prince. Life indeed has a way of dealing with and teaching us things we need to know. And they regretted how they had all treated Nkoli and abandoned her when she needed them the most. No child is a waste indeed, they whispered amongst themselves. And then there was a shout of joy. It was a new dawn in the land, and the villagers will have and enjoy their happy kingdom once again. Nkoli could not contain her joy when she heard the good news, and the king ordered immediately that she returned to the village, giving her a beautiful house to live in as a payback. He was glad she was not stoned to death many years ago. If not, his son would have died a monster, and he would have lost his throne to his evil brother. He wondered how many lives this tradition may have ruined, and how many great destinies may have been lost through this evil practice. He had to put an end to this evil tradition immediately. Weeks later, Mma and Prince Raleigh got married in a lavish ceremony. It was a great moment for the entire village. This was indeed a celebration of true love, after which they all lived happily ever after. Hey besties, thank you for watching this amazing story. I know it's very long, but I noticed you guys do not like the part 1, part 2 series stuff, so I decided to put everything in one video, and it took me a lot of time. I hope you enjoy watching it as much as I did enjoy making it. And if you are watching from this channel and you have been enjoying my stories, I want you to hit the subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so that you get notified whenever we post new stories. Thank you for your support and your amazing comments. I love them so much, and they give me so much hope and encouragement and support. Thank you guys. Thank you so much.